Throughout history, humanity has conducted thousands of experiments in search of new knowledge, but some of them crossed a line they should never have crossed. Today, we will recall the most shocking experiments that show the dark side of science and how far people would go for the sake of discovery. The Milgram Experiment: how far a person can go on order. In 1961, Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most famous and controversial experiments in the history of psychology. His goal was to understand why ordinary people would follow brutal orders from authorities. The study was conducted a few years after the trial of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann, who claimed he was only following orders. Participants in the experiment were told they were taking part in a memory study. They were asked to give another person electric shocks for incorrect answers. In reality, the person receiving the shocks was an actor, and the electricity was fake. However, the participants did not know this. When the victim began to scream in pain and asked to stop, the researchers ordered them to continue. The most frightening discovery was that most people continued the experiment even when they believed they could seriously harm another person. They did so only because the person in the lab coat told them to continue. The experiment showed how much authority can influence human behavior. The study caused a huge scandal in the scientific world. Many psychologists began to criticize Milgram for moral violations and psychological distress of the participants. Despite this, his experiment became one of the most important studies on the nature of obedience and human cruelty. Today, Milgram's experiment is often cited as proof that even ordinary people can do terrible things under certain circumstances. The Stanford Prison Experiment: when people became monsters. In 1971, one of the most famous psychological experiments of the 20th century took place at Stanford University in the United States. It was organized by psychologist Philip Zimbardo to investigate how social roles and power can change human behavior. The experiment was intended to show how people behave in situations similar to a real prison environment. 24 ordinary students were selected to participate, who were randomly divided into two groups: prisoners and guards. A simulated prison was created in the basement of Stanford University. At first, everything seemed like a game, but very quickly, the situation got out of control. The guards began to behave cruelly, humiliate the participants, and use psychological pressure. Some of them entered the role so much that they began to perceive the experiment as a real power over other people. The prisoners began to experience severe stress, fear, and helplessness. The experiment had to be stopped early after 6 days, although it was planned to run for 2 weeks. The reason was that the psychological state of the participants began to deteriorate. The experiment later became a symbol of how dangerous certain social conditions can be. However, over the years, some scientists began to question the results of the experiment. They argued that the participants could have been motivated to behave in certain ways. Despite the controversy, the Stanford experiment remains one of the most famous examples of human behavior research. MKUltra, secret CIA mind control experiments. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union actively engaged in secret research in an attempt to gain an advantage over each other. One of the most mysterious programs was MKUltra, a secret project of the US Central Intelligence Agency that began in 1953. The official goal of the program was to investigate the possibilities of mind control, the effects of drugs, and interrogation techniques. The CIA wanted to understand whether it was possible to force a person to tell the truth, change their behavior, or even create a method of psychological control. The experiments used various substances, including LSD. Some people were given the drugs without their consent, and then their reactions were observed. Some of the research was conducted in hospitals, universities, and even among ordinary citizens who were unaware that they were participating in a secret program. One of the most famous cases was that of Frank Olson, an employee who was secretly given LSD during an experiment. His psychological condition deteriorated rapidly, and a few days later he died after falling out of a hotel window. His death remained a mystery for many years. In the 1970s, information about MKUltra became public knowledge and caused a huge scandal. Some of the documents were destroyed, so many details of the program still remain unknown. Today, MKUltra is considered one of the darkest examples of how far government agencies could go in secret research. Unit 731. Secret Laboratory of the Japanese Army. During World War II, from 1936 to 1945, the Japanese Empire created one of the most horrific secret military programs in history. It was called Unit 731 and was located near the city of Harbin in then-occupied Manchuria, present-day China. Officially, it was a research center for studying diseases and developing methods for protecting the army. In reality, it conducted horrific experiments on living people. The victims were mostly Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, and people from occupied territories. They were called maruts as if they were not people, but research material. The laboratory was used for experiments with infectious diseases, testing biological weapons, and studying how the human body responds to extreme conditions. Some of the most horrific were the frostbite experiments, where people were deliberately exposed to low temperatures to study ways to treat injuries. Various bacteria were also tested, including plague and cholera. Some of the research was conducted without any anesthesia, which made the victims' suffering even greater. After the war, many of the leaders of Unit 731 escaped punishment. Some reports suggest that the United States received research results in exchange for immunity for individual scientists. For decades, Japan and other countries have argued over the extent of these crimes. Today, Unit 731 is considered one of the darkest examples of the use of science to destroy human lives. The history of this laboratory is a reminder that knowledge without morality can become a dangerous weapon. Nazi experiments in concentration camps. The most horrible page of medicine. During World War II, Nazi Germany established a system of concentration camps, where millions of people were subjected to mass atrocities. In addition to forced labor and mass murder, some camps also conducted medical experiments on prisoners. The most famous place was the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp in occupied Poland. One of the most famous doctors was Joseph Mengele, who was later nicknamed the Angel of Death. He conducted experiments on twins in an attempt to study genetics and heredity. People were subjected to painful procedures without their consent. Many victims did not survive these experiments. Nazi camps also conducted experiments on survival in cold water exposure to high pressure, various diseases, and drugs. Officially, this was presented as scientific work, but in reality, it was cruel testing on defenseless people. After the war, some doctors were tried at the Nuremberg trials. These crimes were one of the reasons for the creation of modern rules of medical ethics. The Nuremberg Code was created, which stipulated that experiments on humans should only be carried out with voluntary consent. The history of Nazi experiments remains one of the most horrific examples of how medicine could be used not for salvation, but for torture. It forever changed the world's attitude towards human rights and the responsibility of scientists. Soviet secret experiments, research on the edge of science and fear. During the Soviet Union's existence, especially during the Cold War, the state actively developed secret scientific programs. Some of them were related to military technology, psychology, and human influence. Due to the closed nature of the system, much of this research remained inaccessible to the public for decades. One of the directions was experiments with the human psyche. Soviet scientists investigated the possibilities of influencing behavior, stress, hypnosis, and the limits of human endurance. Some projects had a military purpose, as the government was looking for ways to prepare soldiers for extreme conditions. Experiments with mind control and parapsychology attracted particular attention. In the USSR, there were closed laboratories where telepathy, extrasensory abilities, and the ability to transmit information without conventional communication channels were studied. Many of these studies were never scientifically confirmed. There were also military programs related to chemicals, biological research, and the effects of extreme conditions on the body. Due to secrecy, it is difficult to establish the exact scale of these experiments today. Some of the documents have been destroyed or remain closed. It is this mystery that has given rise to many theories and legends about Soviet experiments. Some stories have real evidence, others have become part of the myths of the Cold War. But the fact remains that many states at that time conducted research that the public only learned about decades later. Animal experiments. Research that changed science. For hundreds of years, animals have been used in scientific experiments to better understand how the human body works. This research was especially active in the 20th century, when medicine and biology advanced rapidly. Thanks to some experiments, it was possible to create drugs, vaccines, and treatments that saved millions of lives. However, some of these studies have been controversial because of their brutality. Scientists have conducted experiments on monkeys, dogs, mice, and other animals, studying diseases, the brain, and the effects of various substances. Some of the experiments were so radical that they were later called examples of scientific misconduct. One famous case is the study of primate behavior. In the 1950s and 1960 seconds, some psychologists tried to understand how attachment and emotions were formed. In such studies, animals could be isolated or artificially placed in conditions that caused them severe stress. There have also been experiments in the past to test the safety of drugs and chemicals. Some of these studies have helped medicine, but at the same time have made society think about the question, where is the line between science and cruelty? Today, the rules are much stricter. Many countries have special committees that monitor the use of animals in research. The history of such experiments shows the complex side of the development of science. Sometimes great discoveries have come at a high moral cost. These experiments changed science forever, but at the same time showed how dangerous knowledge without morality can be. Write in the comments which experiment impressed you the most. Like, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video.